Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome all the participants to this side event today at the Global Disability Summit 2022, which has been organized by Transforming Communities for Inclusion, TCI, in partnership with the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry and Pan African Network of Persons with Psychosocial Disabilities. This event will be moderated by myself and Ms. Elizabeth Umbati from USP Kenya. My name is Vakar Puri. I am based in Pakistan and I am working with Transforming Communities for Inclusion as a senior programs manager. Transforming Communities for Inclusion is an independent global organization of persons with psychosocial disabilities with presence in 32 and is now 32 countries and is now in a going global phase. TCI works with its national leaders and members to enhance their movements at the national level and provide a platform to advocate with the governments for the inclusion. We do this through by our micro grants, trainings, fellowship program, and DPO support grants. I will first start with saying out some of the features of today's webinar. We are pleased to inform you that this webinar is being recorded. There is international sign interpretation. And if you want to access the captions, there is a CC button at the bottom of your screen. You're requested to keep your mics and videos off while you're not speaking and can turn on your video when you get a chance to speak. You are also requested to speak at a normal pace so that the sign interpreter and captioner can meet the flow of the presentation and the statements. During the event, if you have any questions for the panelists, you can leave your question at the Q&A option, which is again at the bottom of your screen, and the panelists will respond to it directly or at the end of the session. I would now like to thank all our eminent speakers who have joined today for this side event on capacity strengthening of organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities to contribute to the GDS Summit 2022 and preparing ourselves for capacity building of DPOs and increasing the participation of persons with psychosocial disabilities in the decision-making processes. As we know that people with psychosocial disabilities, users, survivors of psychiatry, and persons with intersectional neurodiverse identities, they continue to be marginalized in the society. And as we know that they are ignored at every stage of their life by their families, by their friends, and their voices are unheard in the high-level policy circles. People with psychosocial disabilities are still confined to mental health law system, and therefore they end up in healthcare institutions, mental health institutions, forced by their families to stay inside homes. They are sent to the closed door institutions. And due to this confinement, people with psychosocial disabilities are unable to access civil, political, economic, and cultural rights, which are prescribed for persons with disabilities in the UN CRPD. We have gathered here today to demand for excellent, inclusive, and CRPD compliant community based services for persons with psychosocial disabilities, which will give an opportunity to all self advocates and organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities to create a dialogue between stakeholders for living independently in the community. However, in many global south countries, such as Pakistan, there is a continuation in making massive investments in the direction of the mental health care systems. And the mental health laws have forced to bring an increase in the number of small and private institutions in countries where I live in Pakistan. The objective behind today's side event is to focus on Article 4.3 of the CRPD, which clearly mentions that in the development and implementation of legislation and policies to implement the present convention and in other decision-making processes which are concerning issues relating to persons with disabilities, state parties shall closely consult with and actively involve persons with disabilities, including the children with disabilities, through their representative organizations. But unfortunately, people with psychosocial disabilities are still left behind in these discussions and are not considered as persons with disabilities. We are hardly involved in the cross disability movements as well. Even in the national level, the governments are not aware about our constituency. We today demand for identity as persons with disabilities and also demand for capacity building and strengthening of our organizations We demand for deinstitutionalization. We demand involvement of our persons with psychosocial disabilities in the decision-making processes at the national level, at the regional level, and at the global platforms. We would now move towards our first session of the side event, in which we are glad to have our speakers from the government and funding agencies. I thank you once again to join us for the side event. I would like to first invite Mr. Montian Buntan. Mr. Montian is a member of the Senate at the Royal Thai government. He has been a member of the UN CRPD committee from 2013 to 2020. He is also a board member of the Asia Pacific Development Center on the Disability and is a honorary lifetime member of the World Blind Union. Mr. Bontian will share with us what are the opportunities a global South government can create for the inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening from Bangkok to all of you. And first of all, I would like to extend my humble and sincere thanks to TCI-Global, especially my dear friend Barkavi, for involving me in this historic event, knowing that my knowledge on persons with psychosocial disabilities is in no way close to the level of most, if not all, being present here. But perhaps my active participation and willingness to learn with great passion may be a fundamental reason behind such decision. I do not intend to simply refer to any specific text of the CRPD, nor do I pretend to cite any academic or scholarly written document for this presentation, but will only try to humbly synthesize what I've been learning and accumulating from my years of working with friends and colleagues with disabilities, including but not limited to within and outside the CRPD circle. Therefore, I would like to beg for you to please bear with this presentation if it happens to repeat or contradict or even be less attractive to what you really want to hear from me. I like to come up with 3 minimum requirements of opportunities and with 2 conditions to be created for inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities by any global South government. As mentioned above, I'm becoming more minimalistic in my approach to achieving disability rights and disability inclusion. These 3 fundamental components and/or opportunities a global South government should consider if inclusion for persons with disabilities in general or persons with psychosocial disabilities in particular will be achievable. Full and effective participation. It sounds very normal and very popular subject, but I reiterate again that persons with psychosocial disabilities must have opportunities to fully and effectively participate in all aspects of life as individuals or through their representative organizations. And I need not to explain what aspects of life, as it has already mentioned as introduction. And the second component or second opportunities which should be created or open is full, active, and effective accessibility, persons with psychosocial disabilities must have opportunities for full, active, and effective access to goods, services, preferable, and I mean safe and secure and convenient environment and or living conditions. And the third component or third opportunities that must be created or could be created is genuine empowerment or strengthening or capacity building. Persons with disabilities must have opportunities to seek or fulfill genuine empowerment, strengthening, and or capacity building through policies, projects, programs, and activities. These three minimum components or these three minimum opportunities, I hope, and I think should be created by any Global South government, must be accompanied or conditioned or governed by two basic principles. The principle of equality and non-discrimination, and the principle of freedom, freedom of choice or freedom to choose. These two principles must condition all three opportunities for inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Now I'd like to move to actions needed to achieve these three fundamental requirements or opportunities to be created. I would like to propose at least three actions if we are to achieve what I just proposed. First one, taking legislative and administrative measures to ensure equal recognition before the law for persons with disabilities in general and persons with psychosocial disabilities in particular, including introducing provision with disability rights law, which guarantees full legal capacity of persons with psychosocial disabilities. And the second subsegment for this first proposal is through amending or revising civil code. I know some country you are based on civil law and you also have civil code, if applicable, in order to restore full legal capacity for persons with psychosocial disabilities. In several countries, civil code does limit legal capacity of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Thailand as an example, and we are working tirelessly to remove such restriction. And the second action needed is taking legislative and or administrative measures to reform or rethink the whole mental health law or mental health service system, which must liberate persons with psychosocial disabilities from being just object of forced institutionalization, forced treatment, or forced intervention of all kinds. And action number 3, taking legislative and administrative measures to establish, promote, and support disability-driven and disability-inclusive approach to service in the community, including in particular service provided by and provide by or in close collaboration with persons with psychosocial disabilities and their organizations. And I'd like to elaborate this last proposal. In many developing countries in the Southern Hemisphere or South, Global South, we are not well established in terms of institutionalization, although we have been seeing a greater number of institutions being established or being promoted through mental health system. So what I would like to see is to counter such gradual increase of institutionalization with establishment or promotion or support for community service, which should be made available and through provision by and or in collaboration with persons with psychosocial disabilities through their representative organization. I would like to conclude as I try to excuse myself from the beginning. This presentation is not to cite any specific mandate from the CRPD, although I would like to assure you that it is CRPD compliant, or nor would I try to cite any scholarly written statement to justify my argument. It is just my attempt to utilize my experience to come up with a possible solution. I try to avoid a proposal which I think may not be feasible in the short run, especially in my country and several developing countries, or perhaps it should be more appropriate for persons with or brothers and sisters with psychosocial disabilities to propose instead, such as the proposal to completely abolish a guardianship system. However, I strongly believe in full and effective enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms for all people, including those with psychosocial disabilities. The matter is just simply when and how. Let us keep up our high hope, determination, and commitment. And personally speaking, as always, let us give up on giving up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Montian sir. It is a really honor for us to have you with us today. And thank you for emphasizing on the full and effective participation of persons with psychosocial disabilities, because as I see that this is one of the core components to participate fully and effectively in the community. And thank you for highlighting an important action which we all need to do, bringing policy reforms for changing the mental health system and transforming our policies for inclusive community-based services. And you also highlighted about why it is important to strengthening the organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities, and which will definitely bring, which will build the capacity of the movement of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Thank you so much. We would now move to our next speaker, Ms. Elizabeth Kamundia, representing the National Human Rights Institution in Kenya. She will highlight NHRI's, National Human Rights Institution's work in Kenya towards inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities, and what has been their role in bringing the issues of persons with psychosocial disabilities before the policymakers. Over to you, Ms. Kamundia. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation to speak. It really is a privilege to be here. So I work at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I am the focal point on issues of persons with disabilities at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. It is Kenya's national human rights institution. It's set up in accordance with the UN principles relating to the status of national institutions. They are also commonly known as the Paris Principles, and it's accredited as an A status institution by the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions. That's at the international level. And then nationally, it's established, the Commission is established under the Constitution with a broad mandate of protecting and promoting human rights in Kenya. So the Commission is also the designated agency with the responsibility of monitoring the rights of persons with disabilities under Article 33(2) of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And so generally, national human rights institutions have a variety of mandates, including submitting recommendations on matters concerning the promotion and protection of human rights. They receive and investigate complaints on human rights violations. They ensure harmonization of national legislation with international human rights standards through reviewing bills and policies and submitting advisories to Parliament towards moving bills and policies to be more human rights compliant. They encourage the ratification of treaties and submitting relevant reports to treaty bodies, and as well as increasing public awareness on human rights. So from the general roles of national human rights institutions that I have just mentioned, I think it's quite clear what the entry points are in terms of these institutions bringing issues of persons with disabilities before policymakers. And in the case of Kenya, and related to persons with psychosocial disabilities, the Commission has undertaken the following. So we've been involved in promoting the recognition of persons with psychosocial disabilities as persons with disabilities. So about a decade ago, just over a decade ago, the Commission received a complaint in 2011 relating to the exclusion of a person with a psychosocial disability from being recognized as eligible for tax exemption. Now, to explain the context a bit, in Kenya, an affirmative action measure that is in place is that persons with disabilities who are in employment are exempted from paying income tax for the first about $1,500 earned. And in this case, the contention was that the person wasn't eligible for this tax exemption as the person was quote unquote sick and not disabled. So the Commission engaged in dialogue with the relevant state agencies, and in particular wrote a letter to the Kenya Revenue Authority advising that the agency that persons with mental health conditions are legally recognized as persons with psychosocial disabilities and are eligible for benefits that are due to disabled persons. And this was ultimately taken favorably, and there's now more recognition that persons with psychosocial disabilities should be included in these types of benefits. And I know and I acknowledge that there are still difficulties with accessing registration as persons with disabilities, and the process has been criticized as cumbersome and bureaucratic, but at least the acceptance and the recognition exists and is growing. And so I think this is part of the role that national human rights institutions can play in the countries that are represented here, just embracing and including persons with psychosocial disabilities and their organizations as part of the disability movement and as core to the mandate that they take in terms of monitoring rights of persons with disabilities and across all the various roles that NHRIs play. Now, the other thing that we have worked on as an NHRI in Kenya, we've provided advisories on the Mental Health Amendment Bill from a human rights perspective. Now, this was carried out in close collaboration with persons with psychosocial disabilities and their representative organizations, as the Commission currently convenes a network of stakeholders that work on issues of psychosocial disability. And this includes organizations, representative organizations of persons with intellectual disabilities, as well as of persons with dementia. Now, I must acknowledge that there's a need to go beyond mental health laws. And indeed, the conventions call for disability inclusion in all spheres of life. In the light of this, it may ultimately be better to include, of course, mental health issues in general health laws. However, the situation in Kenya currently is that there is an ongoing process to amend the 1989 mental health law, which is really an outdated piece of law, which doesn't even include the word human rights or rights within it. And so we pragmatically, by we here, I mean the National Human Rights Institution, as well as organizations, civil society organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities and cognitive disabilities generally, we pragmatically decided that it was better to participate in the process in order to provide guidance to the greatest extent possible about what a human rights compliant law should look like. And so we made a raft of proposals, some of which were accepted and many of which were rejected. But we did participate in just highlighting the key rights in terms of legal capacity, access to healthcare within the community, the role of supporters in decision-making, emphasis on autonomy and all of that. But the bill in the end, maintains that a representative can still be appointed against the will of the person. It still maintains the use of seclusion and restraint, even though we had obviously strongly advised against this, in line with the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, as well as the Special Rapporteur on Tortures, reports which have called to an end to all coercive and non-consensual psychiatric interventions. The bill is yet to become law. So I acknowledge the contentiousness of mental health laws, and at the same time, I acknowledge the pragmatics of there being a process that is ongoing, and the question of whether to remain completely away from it or whether to engage with, the hope to be part of the process to leading the law progressively to a better place. So those were the debates that we were having. Now, finally, and I know my time is almost up, we have also trained magistrates on access to justice for persons with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities in collaboration with representative organizations of these individuals. And in particular, we emphasized issues relating to legal capacity and competency to testify, as well as accommodations that will be critical in court settings to enable persons with disabilities to access justice on an equal basis with others. I'll stop there and hand back over to you, Walker, and thank you very much for, again, the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kamundia. I think keeping to time is one of the biggest challenge today we are facing, as we have a good number of speakers today with us. And thank you for sharing the importance of identity and recognition of persons with psychosocial disabilities as persons with disabilities. And believe there are countries where persons with psychosocial disabilities are not seen as persons with psychosocial disabilities are not seen as persons with disabilities. You highlighted going beyond mental health laws, and I think this is one of the most important points. And we should, start working towards compiling the best practices for transforming the mental health laws towards inclusive disability legislations. I would now request our third speaker from the Government of Indonesia, Ms. Sandra Moniaga, Commissioner of National Commission on the Human Rights in Indonesia. She is also the coordinator of the Cooperation for the Prevention of Torture, consisting of 5 Indonesian National Human Rights Institutes. She will be sharing with us that what are the views of NCHR in Indonesia on the rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities and their efforts in collaborating with different DPOs in Indonesia to transform the lives of persons with disabilities. Over to you, Ms. Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Um, Allow me to clarify that I'm not representing the Indonesian government. The National Commission on Human Rights is a fully independent state institution. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished speaker, and participants. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to speak in this important forum. I personally believe that this type event may have significant contribution to the Global Disability Summit of 2020. Special appreciation and thanks to TCI and also PA and PPD, and also to my colleague Yeni Rosa from the Indonesian Mental Health Association to invite me to this event. The National Human Rights Commission of Republic of Indonesia, known as Komnas HAM, is an independent state institution with A accreditation from GANRI. Previous speaker explained already about GANRI. Our work is based on several laws, including the law on human rights. And at this moment, we have 7 members or commissioners appointed by the member of the parliament and formalized by the President of Republic of Indonesia. It is for 5 years serving period. In addition to Komnas HAM, Indonesia also has the National Commission on Violence Against Women and also the Indonesia Child Protection Commission as a separate entities with different legal basis. Komnas HAM, Komnas Perempuan, Indonesia Child Protection Commission, Ombudsman of the Republic of Indonesia, and the Witness and Victim Protection Agency signed a memorandum of understanding to develop a joint program promoting cooperation for torture prevention in Indonesia in 2016, after a few years of preparation processes. The program was developed with reference to the optional protocol to the Conventions Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, or which known as OPCAT, even though Indonesia has not ratified. Torture in the dedication is a must. Why? Because torture is a direct attack to civilization and humanity. The UN General Assembly reaffirmed that torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment are prohibited and constitute serious violation of human rights. As part of international community, Indonesia aims to contribute in torture prevention. Indonesia ratified conventions against torture in 1998, and we committed to cultivate the culture of human rights in Indonesia, both horizontally within the society and vertically between individual and the state since 1999, after a political reformation and adoption of human rights principles into the amended constitution. We are convinced that further measures are necessary to achieve the purposes of the conventions against torture and to strengthen the protection of persons deprived of their liberty against torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. Realizing that the government of Indonesia has not taken serious action to ratify OPCAT, nor to take effective measures to prevent acts of torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, therefore, we developed this cooperation for torture prevention in 2016. A cooperation for torture prevention is an approach, and we focus on number 1, prevention by creating conditions that leads to re-recurrence of torture and ill treatment, understanding the pattern of act and environment that allows the act to exist. And secondly, develop constructive dialogue, no shaming, two-way direction, and equal position. What are the strategies for prevention? We do visit places of detentions, fact-finding, make evidence-based report, offer practical recommendations, develop common understanding of torture and ill treatment, develop trust, transparency, and accountability habits, and revise rules and regulations. And prior to the visit and fact-finding mission, we developed a monitoring guideline and established agreement with the ministries or state institutions. Where do we focus our work? The first one is the correctional institution and immigration detention houses. And secondly is the police detention rooms. The third is the military detention rooms. And the fourth is mental health places or social homes. How did we include mental health places or social home within our priority work? We were exposed by serious issue of person with psychosocial disability in 2016 when the Human Rights Watch released their findings, Living in Hell, abuses against people with psychosocial disability in Indonesia, together with the Indonesian Mental Health Association. And we realized that the situation faced by the people within those mental health places are worse or similar with the correctional institution without any judicial or other legal processes. More than 3,000 people are detained, and some of them are also shackled. Our institution continue further with the advocacy of persons with psychosocial disability with the active role of DPOs, such as Indonesia Mental Health Organization, Indonesia Disability Women Association, and many others. We conducted a joint monitoring of the situation, public discussion, including with Ministry of Social Affairs, Ministry of Health, Member of Parliament. The advocacy process continuing, and we are aiming to deinstitutionalizing those mental health places, making sure that government will release those persons, develop comprehensive education program for the families and communities, develop community support system, and guaranteeing support healthcare system. For sure, those work must be conducted in full consultation and participation of the disability people organization. Ladies and gentlemen, the issue of person with psychosocial disability in Indonesia are not merely related to health and social issues. Moreover, it is related to fundamental human rights issues. It is related to non-derogable right, which is one whose infringement is not justified under any circumstances. Generally, right to live and freedom from torture, inhuman or degrading treatment. Those people who have been treated cruelly in the so-called mental health places are victims of human rights abuses. Therefore, they need to be advocated from human rights perspective. It is our responsibility to make sure that the government do pay attention seriously and develop a comprehensive solution with participation of persons with psychosocial disability and the DPOs. At the end of my speech, allow me to quote the report of the Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, Mr. Dainius Puras, after his visit to Indonesia in 2017. Mental health is an emerging issue, but the state needs to invest additional commitment and resources to develop a system that promotes the mental health of everyone, effectively treats and prevent common mental health conditions at the community level, respecting the right of the person with psychosocial and intellectual disability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sandra. We really appreciate all your efforts you are doing in Indonesia and towards working for the rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities and deinstitutionalization, freedom from torture. And this again takes us to the message of transforming the policies and changing the lives of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Um, As we know that there is a big role of funding agencies in the development sector, especially when we aim towards working for the policy reforms. Today, we think way beyond the existing systematic approach to mental health in the global South countries, and we think beyond mental health laws. I may now invite Ms. Luhan. Ms. Luhan is a program officer at the Open Society Foundations Human Rights Initiative, where she works to advance the rights of persons with disabilities from a global perspective by supporting the growth of the movement and the development of key concepts such as inclusive education, legal capacity, and access to justice. Over to you, Ms. Luhan.
Thank you, Wakar. Thanks, everyone. Hi, I'm Luhan, and I'm with the Open Society Foundation's Human Rights Initiative. For the past few years, my work at OSF have been focusing on supporting the movement of people with disabilities globally. And I've learned a great deal from working with TCI and other organizations run by and for people with psychosocial disabilities using survivor psychiatry and MAD activists. So when I was invited to speak today, I was very honored, but also very excited. As a grant maker, but also someone who had spent solid time working for a disabled persons organizations in the past, I feel like I have some observation ideas. And it is always a good position to be in when you're invited to tell other people how to spend their money. I want to share some of my thoughts below. So for the past decade or so, OSF as a human rights funder, a private funder, has supported actors across the world who worked on mental health reforms. In particular, we supported people with psychosocial disabilities, user survivors, and their allies in the legal and clinical practices to challenge their existing mental health legislations. And today, looking back with the hindsight of 15 years of living and working with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, I think what we're learning now is both what activists have achieved on this journey in the past decade or so, but also what are the limitations of an approach that's very heavily focused on mental health reform. I think increasingly activists and their supporters, myself included, are reflecting, how is this still the reality we live in? A reality that for most people, international donors included, mental health assessments, treatments, and hospitalization without expressed consent is still not considered a form of disability-based discrimination in detention. And even when the CRPD has made it abundantly clear. So first of all, I want to talk about the challenges people face in regarding to funding. People with psychosocial disabilities are marginalized in the mainstream disability rights movement. I think many speakers have touched on that. So funding for DPO-led advocacy work is already very, very limited. And marginalized folks don't actually get much chance to grow their own organizations, sort out their own demands, and develop their advocacy strategies. And people with psychosocial disabilities are increasingly being pushed to seek mental health funding. And there is funding in the mental health field, whether it's for developing best practices, reforming mental health laws, but it's almost impossible to break free from the confine of mental health and explore solutions that are outside of the existing system. Also, their objectives are often closely related to health outcomes and defined by others. And most recently, we increasingly see that the basic human rights of people with psychosocial disabilities to be free from detention, coercion, abandonment, to be truly part of the community is overshadowed by the right to mental health. People feel that they have to, if they want to have access to mental health services, they have no other choice but to accept that these services will always predicate on the possibility of harming them by resorting to force and coercion. And no one should be asked to make those choices. No organizations should be asked to make those choices and make that easier. And most of the time, there is no choice. And that shouldn't be the norm for mental health legislations the way it is now. So my first reflection and recommendation to donors in this field is that we need to think more clearly about the funding we have, whether it's funding to support disability rights or funding to support healthcare, mental health, and other specific thematic subjects. And what do we want to achieve and how do we avoid perpetuating harm and ignorance. So if we want mental health services to be accessible, affordable, effective, then make them accessible, affordable, and effective the way any healthcare services can be, to build on the basis of free and informed consent, and fund people with psychosocial disabilities to tell you what works, what doesn't work, and how they want the system either to be part of their lives or not. And don't fund people to recount the most traumatic part of their lives and have them dubbed as recovery stories. And people's lives are so much more than that, so much more than mental health, than access to medicine. Real solutions, as many people have said, a true way out often lie beyond that. So I know that people with psychosocial disabilities, use of survivor psychiatry, are building partnerships with the wider disability communities, with independent living movements, with women's rights movements, with racial justice movements. So find a way to fund those coalitions and create spaces for them to grow. People are also looking beyond the mental health paradigm for other policy venues to claim their rights. Disability rights legislation regarding legal capacity, looking at civil code, as Mr. Bontan spoke about. And beyond that, there are a whole bunch of other ways, right? Long-term care legislations, policies that promote independent living in the communities, reform of the criminal justice system. Truly every aspect of the society will need to change. And funders, especially funders of disability rights, will need to broaden our scope of work accordingly and be guided by the community. And people with psychosocial disabilities belong to a larger disability community in a political sense. So if you're funding the cultural shift in societies to increase the communities familiar with people with disabilities, then you should also fund the efforts of people with psychosocial disabilities to normalize their experiences, not to pathologize those experiences and give them a diagnosis. To truly support the community, we need a fund for the growth of constituency-led organizations. I think that's the theme of today's discussion. And in particular, the organizations led by people with psychosocial disabilities. Not for them to be in your focus group, but for them to reject your ideas entirely, perhaps, to set up their own tables, to conduct research and define their issues, to develop their politics and reactions to legislation and policy proposals that's put in front of them. In particular, I think we should also thinking about funding DPOs that are making explicit attempts to lift up the voices of those who are currently being institutionalized, those who are in psychiatric hospitals against their will, those who are locked away in social care homes, and those who live on the streets and under the control of their family or social workers. The path of deinstitutionalization and true community as inclusion should be guided by those who are harmed by social stigma, segregation, and detention, and those who are still suffering from these injustices. And I'll stop there because we have limited time, and I want to hear more of what others have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luhan. Thank you for highlighting that there is a need to, re-examine and listen closely to the movements of persons with psychosocial disabilities, and transforming the societies from deinstitutionalization. I will not take so much of time in this first session and would request Liz Umbati to take the floor from here and for the facilitation of the next session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Waka, confirm that I can be heard.
Sorry?
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can do that. You can start.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Waka, and for the fantastic session, really, and the messaging that we've received that is really, really insightful. So as introduced earlier, my name is Elizabeth Ombati. I'm based in Kenya. I identify as a woman with a psychosocial disability, and my advocacy over the years has been with the user movement called Users and Survivors of Psychiatry in Kenya. And I'm really, really happy to be part of this discussion. So in this second part, which might take approximately 15 minutes, so stay with us, we are going to hear from leaders who have made a huge impact, both within our movement of persons with psychosocial disabilities, as well as within the wider cross-disability movement. So we have Yeni, we have Robina, and we have Sylvester. I'm going to start by introducing Yeni first, then we will follow up with Robina and Sylvester. So Yeni Rosa is the chairperson of the Indonesian Mental Health Association, and she has many years of experience working on various issues of rights of persons with psychosocial disabilities. So her work has not just been limited to the mental health sector, and she collaborates and engages with other human rights movements and the cross-disability movements. She has strongly pushed for a paradigm shift in mental health advocacy to move towards development and the disability movement. So Yeni Rosa, please, for the next 5 or so minutes, could you please speak to us about creating an advocacy environment at the national level for the inclusion of persons with psychosocial disabilities? You know, what does this look like based on your experiences? Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz. Hello, everyone. My name is Yeni Rosa Damayani. Yeah, one thing that we learned from more than 10 years of advocating for the rights of persons with disabilities, we cannot fight alone. If we fight alone, your voice would be swallowed and unheard, especially by the government. For a minute, it seems like my voice is not heard. Hello, can you hear my voice?
Yes, yes,
all right.
Yes, it's
so, okay, right. Right. So one thing that we learned from more than 10 years of advocating for the rights of persons with disability is that you cannot fight alone. If you fight alone, your voice would be swallowed and unheard, especially by the government, who really, you know, have the biggest role in the life of person with psychosocial disabilities. So you have to make allies. That's basic. You have to make allies. But who is your closest allies? Our closest allies are, of course, our fellow people with disabilities. There are various organizations from different type of organization, different types of disabilities. They are our close allies. Of course, what they face is different from what we face. I mean, our barriers are different. Our barriers are different from those who the blind friends and the deaf friends, but we are facing some of the core issues, you know, regarding persons with disabilities, discrimination, stigma, and many other things that we face is very much similar. Also, of course, we are working. All of us, all of the disability movement, we are working on the fulfillment of those wonderful chapters of the CRPD. If we fight for this, for our rights just by ourselves, then our force is not strong enough. My experience here in Asia is that we started to gain momentum when we joined the disability movement, not only, you know, by ourselves, the groups of psychosocial disabilities. Together with the cross-disability movement, we managed to push forward various laws and regulations on persons of disabilities, even laws that not specific for persons with disabilities, but affect the life of persons with disabilities, such as the laws on the prevention of sexual violences, law on the disaster management, etc., etc. In each laws, cross-disability coalition, including us, persons with psychosocial disability, we will submit and advocate together very strongly for to make that our voice, our inputs are involved in the draft of laws that we are advocating for. And in each draft of law, every groups of persons with disabilities, OPDs, we will provide our particular inputs in the law, including us. So, persons with psychosocial disability will contribute what is our biggest concern and needs in, for example, in the law on sexual violences, in the law on disaster management. And together, we combine this input and advocating together. That's really make a huge difference in Indonesia. Also, for example, like the issue of legal capacity and institutionalization. Currently, this is also quite well known amongst national DPOs in Indonesia, especially those who live in Jakarta, the capital. And it become, the issue of legal capacities and institutionalization right now has become quite main or important issues of the disability movement at the national level. It's not only collaboration with cross-disability movement that is important. We also need to expand our network beyond our comfort zone, beyond the disability movement. We also need allies in other groups as well, such as the women's groups, legal aid groups, and other human rights groups. The issue of institutionalization now has been adopted by many groups outside of the Psychosocial Disability in Indonesia. Our working together with Indonesian Commission on National Commission on Human Rights is one of the proof how important it is to really reach outwards to other groups in Indonesia. So what is my message? My message is reach out, get different allies as much as you can, make a different strategies, reframe your issues according to the particular groups that you reach out to. For example, when you reach out to the labor groups, reframe the issue into the rights of work for a person with psychosocial disability. When you talk about, when you reach out to women's groups, we reframe the issue into the issues of women with psychosocial disabilities who leave the institution, and etc., etc. So we have different allies, we have different strategies, and we work together to gain our goal. Yeah, that's my experience in Indonesia in working together with different groups, including cross-disability groups, which is our closest allies, and also the women groups who becoming one of our second closest allies, as well as other human rights groups. Thank you very much. Back to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Yeni. Always a pleasure to listen and to get these insights that I'm sure all of us, are picking and taking back to our respective countries and our respective advocacies to really support this allyship and the moving forward, of our organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities. Thank you so much. So our next speaker is Robina Alambuya. So Robina is a married woman, a loving mother. She's a mentor and teacher by profession in church leadership. Robina is a renowned, seasoned disability inclusive advocate and feminist leader. She's the executive council member in the Disability Forum. She's a board member in the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. She's also founding director of Triumph Uganda Mental Health Support Recovery Program and co-founder of My Story Initiative. Robina, welcome. So kindly share with us from the African context around the capacity building of persons with psychosocial disabilities. So what is being done over the years to strengthen capacities of persons with psychosocial disabilities through their representative organizations, which would also support them to participate in regional and global engagement, such as what we have now. So also you can put a focus on women with psychosocial disabilities. Thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Liz. I just want to appreciate us all and everyone who has given time to listen to us and to our issues. I begin by appreciating really the gift of life that we have. I appreciate also TCI. I appreciate the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, the Pan-African Network of people with psychosocial disability, for bringing us together this day. I would like to appreciate what has already been shared. So for me, I'm going to share from my wealth experience of a triumphant journey as a woman with psychosocial disability, who has, by grace, been able to break through many barriers and to take on leadership position at different levels. And I believe as I share, we'll be able to see what has worked and maybe best practice can be learned. Okay, as I grew in the rural area, I came to know, I didn't know much about disability dynamics until I was, I think, getting to my 40s. Then Mental Health Uganda opened the door through peer support. One of my peers came to tell me about what is happening in the disability dynamics, because I was working at the community trying to support other persons with psychosocial disabilities on my own and at a family level. Then I joined the psychosocial disability movement. That was in 2008. And I was inspired by individuals that I saw, because leaders inspire other leaders. Good leaders inspire. So I was inspired by the leadership that I found in the psychosocial disability movement. Individuals like Daniel Oiga in Uganda and in South Africa, Tina in New York, and Bagavi, and other leaders that I would meet at different times. I believe that as I was inspired, I'm also inspiring many others that I mentor in the next generation. So at this particular time, one thing I would like to appreciate is the organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities. If they have the capacity, they are able to raise leaders. I appreciate the Pan-African Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry, by then, now known as the Pan-African Network of People with Psychosocial Disabilities. And I also appreciate the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. They saw a potential in me as a growing leader, and they trusted me in positions of leadership. So it takes trust. They trusted him, they didn't know much, but they saw a certain potential and trusted me on their board to be able to lead our organization. So I performed in the area of my strength. And for people with psychosocial disabilities, if we are to support their capacities, we need to begin from their area of strength. And that's what happened to me. And as I performed, the World Health Organization was able to recognize me. They even identified and selected me to receive a Swiss award of people who are making meaningful contribution to the vulnerable people in society. So I received that Swiss award in Geneva. I really appreciate. What does this say? That even when we are beginning, even the little that we are able to achieve, we need to be recognized and awarded. Then this one even inspires more and even mitigates the stigma that is our main barrier to progress. Now I sit at the Africa Disability Forum, as you have heard, on the Executive Council of the Africa Disability Forum. So in all that journey, I have been working a leadership journey as a woman with psychosocial disabilities, overcoming all those barriers. As we know that women everywhere else struggle to break through, to be able to sit in places of leadership. So I would like to really appreciate organizations which maybe many can learn from, we can all learn from them. Organizations that have worked with a woman with psychosocial disabilities in the leadership journey to see that I am able to sit in those places of leadership that we would like many others, even the next generation, to sit in. Places of decision-making, high-level meetings. These organizations have been following me, you know, when they also realize that I have a potential. I appreciate Disability Rights Fund and Open Society Foundation. They supported me to go to a very high-level meeting on disability and development for me to raise a voice on behalf of all persons with disabilities. Without them, maybe I would not have been able to go even when the invitation was there. I appreciate the International Disability Alliance. They have been supporting the World Network. They supported us to go to the Commission on the Status of Women to raise our voices also and present our work. I also appreciate at a national level. Okay, I appreciated IDA and also ADD. I appreciate NUDIPU at a local level here. And Deliverance Church Uganda that has been supporting me even in church leadership. We need leadership in all spheres of life.
Sabina?
So, yes.
Sorry, I have to interrupt you. Could you kindly wind up? So sorry for the time that is really running out.
Yeah. Yes. So, I'm now voicing out on issues of women with psychosocial disabilities. That as we have seen that women with psychosocial disabilities, we are really a diverse group. We may not be the same, but each one of us has talent. We have inborn gifts, we have creative skills and great potential. But the challenge is that is faced by women with psychosocial disabilities is that most of the time we are rejected, we are marginalized, we are ignored, we remain invisible at all levels. And so many are left behind. To conclude, as Liz has being aware of the short time we have, in conclusion, women with psychosocial disabilities must have access to the open world and to its opportunities for inclusion through realization of civil, political, social, economic, cultural rights as prescribed by the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities and also by the Sustainable Development Goals. So the voice of women with psychosocial disabilities, many have been saying, we need capacity, not rejection. We need capacity, not rejection. We need to hear in this Global Disability Summit, we need to hear comments specific to the building the capacity of women with psychosocial disabilities and their organization, so that we can ensure full development, advancement, and empowerment to full potential and dignity, and also love as human beings. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robina, for those insightful comments. And thank you everyone that is still around here. Please stay for the next 5 or so minutes because we are going to listen to Sylvester. Sylvester Katontoka is the founder of Mental Health Users Network of Zambia. He's a long-term disability advocate who has continued to contribute to ending stigma and tackle discrimination and enhance the protection and promotion of human rights for persons with psychosocial disabilities. Sylvester, please, in 5 minutes, just share with us about barriers that are faced by organizations of persons with psychosocial disabilities in as far as strengthening them is concerned, and also highlight opportunities that there are in having tools and access to raising our voices or their voices in such platforms. Please take the floor, 5 minutes.
Greetings I pass to everyone who is listening to this voice. And thank you very much for an opportunity to just but do a bit of some sharing. Indeed, persons with psychosocial disabilities have endured this uncalled for suffering for no apparent reason, but indeed the ignorance that is on the other side or on the other side of the coin. This ignorance needs to be met. Allow me to give Zambia as a case on the way we have journeyed from a life of shame to a life of where we are being called to actually contribute on the table as partners to developing issues of mental health. Zambia did want to start using the archaic law that was left behind, which really dehumanized anyone who is associated with mental illness. And this law needed to be kicked out for us to breathe a sigh of relief. And as a person who moved away from the institution, getting into the community, facing stigma, discrimination, an illness that I never knew, but had an impact on my day-to-day life. Why should they be using stigma on an innocent person? That pained me a great deal. But the good part of the pain brought actually some lemonade, in the sense that as I was walking around looking for colleagues who were also carrying a face of shame, hope started coming in our lives. Hope started coming in our lives. And as a small group, we started like meeting to see how we can also be part of Zambia. This small group started talking about our situations. This group started bit by bit challenging these simple, useless arguments targeting innocent people. And the simple arguments started growing attention to people who were listening. To the radios we went, we cried, we challenged, we talked, and some good Samaritans were hearing our voices. And some were saying, yes, we can hear some voices of reasoning in the mental health sector. At that time, we had KEPA, a Finnish organization that was very particular with people living with disability in the country. When they heard our voice and not being part of them, they extended a hand to call us that we be part of the disability movement in Zambia. Just being part of the disability movement in Zambia, our issues started coming out. All those hidden issues started coming out. And people were very surprised to learn that actually there are some voices that can reason despite having passed through a world of mental illness. What did they do? They asked us to become a formal organization so that we are engaged as partners with KEPA, a Finnish organization. What did KEPA do? KEPA did the very good thing that made Munza be an organization to reckon with in this country. They had to take us back to the drawing board and build the capacity in us on how we should engage, on how we should be a force to reckon with, of how we should actually be courageous to engage and engage those that are so-called duty bearers. What did they do?
Sylvester,
Yes?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but you have to wind up.
Yes. So as in winding up, KEPA did put all the systems in the organization such that as an organization, it became credible. It's only when the organization is given all the systems that people can appreciate that whatever we are doing the right things, following the them principles that each and every other person serves. In my conclusion, every reason to support organizations so that they are made to be capable organizations that they engage. Let's build capacity to those organizations. They have the authority, they have the means, and they are a solution to the problems that they face. Not until we build capacity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sylvester, for those powerful statements of the journey that your organization took until the point where you are at now. Okay. And so I wish we could go on and on. This is really powerful. We needed about 3 or 4 hours, but we appreciate that the Global Disability Summit is opening and we need to be there. So thank you, Yeni. Thank you, Robina. Thank you, Sylvester. I'm taking this back to Bagavi for closing.
Thanks a lot, Wakar, Liz, and all participants to this panel. It's been really a powerful panel, and really don't want to take a lot of time. Wakar, do you want to take that group photo? I think we love to have a group photo, even though it's virtual. So shall we do that before we say thank you? Yeah. So if I may request everyone to switch on your videos. And switch on those smiles as well, so we can have big smiles. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Montian sir.
Yes.
Can you turn on your video? You're taking a group photo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So Wakar, over to you.
Yes, I would just want to say that you can smile. And it's done. Yeah, thank you. And we can say thank you, Bhargavi. And
yeah, I'd like to specifically thank PAN PDD and the World Network of Users and Survivors of Psychiatry. I'd like to echo what Robina said so elegantly, that we need to appreciate. And when we appreciate, we bring more people into our fold, and we make more people capable of listening to us. So it's been really wonderful. I hope that we will continue these. I'd like to thank each of you. I know that it's going to be a busy day, a couple of days today and tomorrow. So thank you for being with us, all the speakers and people who have joined us for this session. We hope to be in touch. Reach out to us. Thank you all so much. It's been wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Bye from India.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye from Bangkok.
Bye from Jakarta.
goodbye from Pakistan.
Nairobi.
Bye from Jakarta.
Bye-bye from Uganda.
Bye.